I was thinking about it in the last segment. It's called the Milgram experiment. If we have time today, I will play some of that for you just to show you again how easy it is for the average you and me to fall prey to these psychological operations that are used on us on a daily basis. It's really true. We understand marketing. I mean, it is a daily basis situation. So how do you overcome that? How do you defend against that? You just got to be rigorous. You just need to be rigorous. And also, I want to get to this. So here we are. I just played for you. You accept the reality with which you are presented. Then I go and play for you a vice president of the United States of America when you've got 2 million, the most ever, 2 million illegal immigrants crossing our border. And the vice president of the United States says, the border's secure. I don't know what you're seeing, but the border's secure. There's no problem. We know that's not true, right? So there's obviously issues there. You've got known alleged terrorists crossing the border. I think it's like 62, 67 up to this point. So you know that's happening. There's other things that are going on, which we've seen taking place with some of these illegal immigrants. And yet the vice president wants to say, hey, this is secure. Now, on top of that, you put that on top of this dialogue between the president of the United States and many others in administration on what's the biggest threat facing America today. If you and I were to sit down and have a cup of coffee right now and we're hanging out and I asked you, hey, let me ask you, like, what would you say is the biggest threat facing America today? What would you say? What do you feel is the biggest threat facing America today? Now, there are many of them, right? There are a myriad of threats that face our nation, our communities, our families. And yet, what does this administration want to put a red alert out on 2 months before midterm days? This administration wants to put a red alert on domestic violent terrorists. In other words, mega supporters, people that actually want to go out and make America great again. This administration is going to tell you, because they know we accept the reality of the world of which we're presented, most people, that people that want to make America great again are the greatest threat our nation faces. In fact, to the extent that now DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, has put out a memo trying to raise, again, red alerts on these domestic violent terrorists. Now, I think what's really fascinating to keep in mind, I'm going to play some an interview with the DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. But keep in mind, do you remember when and why the Department of Homeland Security was created? It's been around for so long now, we just sort of presume it's like the FBI. Department of Homeland Security has been around since the 1960s, most of us would think. DHS, which now covers, it's probably one of the bigger monsters, if you will, within the government, wasn't even created until November of 2002. Wasn't even part of the government until November 2002. It was created because of post 9/11, what took place in 9/11, which obviously we commemorated yesterday because it was 21 years since that horrific day took place. So DHS wasn't even around until 2002. And now the script has been flipped so much that the number one thing that DHS wants to focus on is people that want to make America great again. So I'm going to play for you a little bit of this interview. I'll kind of jump in and out because it's stunning to hear what the Secretary of DHS is going to try to say to you with a straight face. And here it is.
Security Agency. We have a Center for Prevention Programs and Partnership to address the threat of domestic violent extremism. We've grown our grant funds working in partnership with state, local, tribal, territorial governments. We've grown along with that threat because it is our obligation to do so, to make sure that the American people are safe and secure, regardless of the nature of the threat that we confront.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Secretary, you have said that domestic extremism, quote, is the single greatest terrorism-related threat in the United States.
I mean, can you believe that? Domestic extremism, which now is a very broad brush. We've been talking about it often on the show. Back in January, and before then, they were trying to change the domestic terrorism law so they could use federal prosecution against everyday Americans, domestic extremism, the single greatest terrorism-related threat in the United States of America today, as our border is being inundated. In fact, the governor of Texas has called it an invasion, while our border is being invaded by people that we don't even know.
What are the best ways to combat the domestic terrorism threat?
I think, of course, we have to address the underlying cause. And in fact, the president is convening a summit against hate next week. We have to address.
Wow. Has anyone else told you about this summit? Do you does everyone see what's happening here? We talked about this on September 2nd. Because what happened on September 1st? September 1st was the night that President Joe Biden went out with the red backdrop. Some of the most bizarre political optics I've ever seen. And basically threatened 74 million Americans as being some of the worst people on the planet. Because here's the one thing that you need to know, and I sort of touched on this maybe on September 2nd when I shared this, and thank you for everyone that shared that monologue. It's been shared now, I think, 700 times, 75,000 views. So thank you. Continue to share great content here. But one of the things that you need to know about humans, and some people know this, some people don't, is that you and I will do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. Let me repeat that. You and I will do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. That is why when you see the political ads right now, i.e. Jensen versus Walz, right? The reason that Walz is starting to make some movement in the polls, at least some of the polls that are out there, is because what is Walz doing? He is destroying Scott Jensen. Everything that comes out from Governor Walz is too extreme. He's an extremist. He's extreme, blah, blah, right? That creates pain in your mind that I can't vote for someone that's extreme. That's going to create pain for me and my family. Where what Jensen is doing, Jensen is coming out and he's saying, hey, I'm Scott Jensen. And, I'm not for abortion. I'm pro-life, but I'm not going to he's still trying to talk about Scott Jensen. People will do more to avoid pain than they will to gain pleasure. Thus, if Scott Jensen, in my opinion, wants to start to move up in the polls and start to have a great opportunity to win, which I still think he can, you've got to generate pain in people's brains around your opponent. You got to come out and talk about, hey, look, Walz is dangerous. Have you seen the carjackings that have gone up in Minneapolis? I mean, Tim Walz is dangerous for Minnesota. Did you see what happened in the 3rd precinct? I mean, that's the kind of dialogue you want to create and generate, but I don't see that happening at this point. My point is that is the strategy right now the Biden administration is using, is to smear anyone and everyone that wants to make America great again, because that will create pain in your brain. Thus, you won't vote for many of the mega candidates or people that represent making America great again. We'd love to hear your point of view. The number to call into the show, 701-271-1100. Again, 701-271-1100. You can email us studio at chrisbergshow.com.